What is up, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the combat shotgun in Fortnite OG because it was added in the most recent 7 and 8 update. As always, if you guys do find this video helpful, informative, interesting, remember to give it a like, subscribe, like, see more, and comment down below what you think of the combat shotgun. So, as per usual, the first thing we're going to talk about is going to be its damage, and as far as damage goes, it's the weakest in the current loot pool. The drum shotgun may be added this upcoming Thursday, but as the game sits currently, this is the weakest in the loot pool, and it's kind of hard to find damage numbers this season because a lot of the weapons do different damage in BR than they do in creative. Like the pump shotgun, the gold one, does 185 max in creative and 207 max in BR, so it's hard to test things. But the combat in creative does 67 to the body for the blue one, 70 for the purple, 74 to the head, and then the headshots, which I think will be the same between BR and creative, is 85 max damage for the blue, 90 max damage for the purple, and 95 max headshot damage for the gold. And the reason why I think this will be the same damage regardless is that these weapons could be doing more damage than that. The combat shotgun just has a damage cap, and the damage cap is 85, 90, and 95 respectively, per the rarity. In BR currently, the blue combat does 57 damage, the purple one does 60, and I would assume the gold one does 63 to the body as far as like a max body damage goes. But the only time I've seen a gold one this season was in game, and I didn't really have a chance to like check the damage. I was just like, I picked it up and used it. But I think the headshot damage will stay the same because, like I talked about with the damage cap and the fact that these weapons could be doing much better headshot damage if there wasn't a damage cap. So I would expect the max headshot damage on the blue to be 85, the max headshot damage on the purple to be 90, and then the max headshot damage on the gold combat shotgun to be 95. So you're probably looking at that and you're like, this is outrageously bad. 57 body damage for the blue one and 85 headshot damage for the blue one, and that's going to be the most common one you find. That's kind of rough. But what it does have going for it is that it has the highest fire rate currently in the game. It has a 1.7 fire rate, whereas the TAC has a 1.5. It has the tightest pellet spread, and it has the most range of any of the shotguns currently in the loot pool, and that range difference is kind of huge. The combat will deal its max damage up to 13 meters. That's where it'll kind of start to drop off, whereas the pump starts to fall off at 7 and the TAC starts to fall off at 8.1. So that's like a little less than double the pump range for its max damage. And where it gets kind of crazy is that the combat will still be doing 50% of its max damage at 30 meters, whereas both the TAC and the pump just stop doing damage altogether at those ranges. So when the TAC and the pump are, useless, they're doing literally no damage, the combat will still be doing 50% of its damage, and it will keep doing damage up to 60 meters. 60 meters is the fall off for the combat shotgun, where it will just be doing no damage at all. It used to be 100 meters in actual like OG Fortnite, and that's why it was such like a huge deal when it came out. It had so much range. It also had more damage and no damage cap back then. And you might be thinking, like, this range is nice, but do you really want to be using your shotgun at 30 meters? Not really, probably not. The AR is going to be better there, but it can be pretty helpful in situations where, like, when you have someone weak and then they like get a grapple off or they shockwave away while you're shooting at them. With the combat, you can just keep shooting, and it has a good fire rate, a tight pellet spread, and good range, so you can keep tagging them while they're using that grapple to get away from you, or while they're using that shockwave. Sure, they will get to the point where you're not going to be doing damage to them, or the damage you're doing is so useless, but you get like an extra shot or two in those situations where your shotgun is still relevant that you wouldn't really have with the pump attack. Another situation where I really like this range is when I'm kind of like shockwaving or grappling onto somebody, like when you're falling onto them from the sky, you can kind of do a few chip damage shots. Not only is the fire rate really good, but the range is relevant to where you're still going to be doing damage at those ranges, whereas like the pump and the TAC really aren't. That can make pushing people kind of awkward sometimes. And another type of fight I really like the range is if you have anybody landing on you, because I think it's much easier to hit someone out of the sky with a shotgun than the AR if they're trying to land like directly on you. If someone's kind of like mid-range-ish, it's really not that, like, doesn't matter. The AR would probably be better. But when they're trying to land right on you, it's such an awkward fight that, like, that range is really nice. And that's why I think a lot of people are going to hear that it has the lowest damage and just assume that means it's the worst. And, there are situations and fights where it definitely is the worst shotgun in the loot pool. Kind of depends how you play it. But the added range is something that you probably are going to appreciate more than you kind of think. And if you've been playing it all this season, you know the shotguns can be like really inconsistent. And like shotguns have kind of just always been inconsistent in Fortnite because you get damage based on how many pellets you hit, and sometimes you don't hit very many pellets, so you don't get very much damage. But also in Fortnite OG, the range of the pump and the tack is much worse than what we've had recently. Like if you look at like the Sharptooth or the Maven from last season, both of those shotguns had much more range than their OG counterparts, but also the pellet spread on the OG shotguns is much worse than what we've seen in more recent seasons. And like both of those factors kind of lead to that inconsistency more, whereas like the combat definitely doesn't have as high highs, but I feel like it's just a more consistent weapon because of that range and because of that pellet spread and because of that fire rate. Like if you miss one shot or a shot doesn't really go that well for you, it's really not that big of a deal because the fire rate is so good. But if you miss a shot with a pump or you get like a 13 damage shot, that's probably going to be the end of your fight. So the combat, its value is fire rate, consistency, and the range kind of, and whether or not the range is useful for you is really going to depend on your playstyle. I think the way to play the combat is going to be in like a more controlled style. Like if you like playing off of cover well, or playing off like bunkers and like kind of getting chip damage with your shotgun, that's where the combat is going to thrive. Also, if you're playing like team game modes and you tend to play at like a slower pace than the rest of your team, there's just always going to be somebody that's naturally the one behind. And if that's how you prefer to play, then the combat is probably going to be better for you than the pump, because you can just kind of deal chip damage while your team is like getting in there. So if you're more like not really passive but controlled player, like the combat could be really good for you. If you wanted to just shockwave or grapple right onto somebody and fight them, the pump or the tack is probably going to be the better shotgun for that for sure. Even if you have like good opening damage, like I'm not saying when you just push someone with no damage, but even if you have good opening damage, if I'm going to push somebody, I think I would rather have the pump or the tack. But if you're playing more controlled, I think the combat can be good. Another downside of the lower damage, and this is kind of what turns me off to the shotgun the most, is that if you're ever in like a disadvantage in a fight and you need to turn that fight, the pump or the tack is going to be much better for that. Like if you're weak and then somebody is like chasing you or pushing you, you can kind of get behind a corner and then play right shoulder peek. And if you have a good pump, you could deal a lot of damage in one shot and potentially just like completely turn that fight, And even the tack shotgun, while it doesn't have the best damage, you can hit for like 100 plus with the tack this season if you have a good shot and get kind of lucky in that situation. And like those high damage shotgun shots can really change the course of a fight in like a short time span, whereas like I feel like the combat, that just really isn't going to happen, because even if you hit a max damage shot with the blue one, it's 80, it's 90 with the purple, and I've seen the gold one time since it's been in the game, so it's like you're not going to have it that much anyways, So that type of situation and that type of fight, I think the combat really stinks. If you're ever in a disadvantage, it's hard to kind of turn that with the combat shotgun. You probably just need to like completely reset the fight and heal, but it's also harder to completely reset the fight and heal this season because of the way the heals are. So the combat is good, and I think a lot of players will probably prefer it or maybe think it's their favorite shotgun, especially if they do like the range and kind of play a bit more like passive or slower than their teammates and like to play controlled. But for me, I think I would rather have like a high rarity pump or a high rarity tack than the combat 100% in zero build. And if I'm playing builds, I would take pretty much any pump over the combat this season. So it's good. I don't think it's horrid. I don't mind using it, but it's just not my preferred choice this season. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. If you found this helpful, interesting, informative, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.